feel like our main connection was our strong belief that this journey of becomingness is totally needs our permission to play creatively, and that we need our intuition to know how to navigate that path of play through creativity. Otherwise, it's just too wide open. So I feel like we were really on point with that. And we did that thing, which is that word that's overused, but we created a container, and it was a podcast. It just so happened that we shared the conversations, which gave us the structure to keep going. And then, and at the beginning, we wrote that blurb being like, you know, we're two mothers, we're at different stages, but there's always that background question of like, how do you balance being the woman with the family, with so much creative energy and so much ideas, and like needing so many lifetimes to realize all the things that we want to do, and just feeling like at the beginning of the year, like, what does this look like? No idea, but just know that it's time to, we talked a lot about making space. How do you make that space? And I feel like in one sense, we've answered that question. And it's almost like we've made space by taking up space with our commitment to have this conversation. That's the bizarre thing, isn't it? We've found more space by putting something in it, but it's what we put in it, right? It was a very specific kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when I look back to what I was, my goals and objectives for the Golden Flower, it was that touchstone. It was to be able to like stay connected to my creative projects, to finish some of my creative projects, the ones that I felt were ones that I wanted to follow through on. And being able to, work on the stuff, like getting back to my screenplay, that was amazing for me. Like that was such a huge rush of energy. And I mean, that was kind of what I was hoping to get out of this is to create that space.
So
So
here's a question for you. Like, I'm really like, what is it that you know that you knew before and maybe you know more about now? Like, and it's a question for me too. When, knowing that you wanted to stay connected to the projects that were simmering in the background, knowing that you had the unfinished screenplay, the unfinished poems, the unfinished books, and the visual meditations, all of these things. And what was it that you knew? When we say stay connected to the conversation, I feel like both you and I stumble a little bit. Like, we know so clearly that that's like the way, but can we say like why we know that? Like, we must know that from like past experiences, like a certain quality of conversation. I don't know, like, what is it that you know about staying connected to specific types, not specific, like what is it that we know that why we needed to have the kind of conversations we've been having like for 11 episodes that would have these kind of results?
well, and I know that we've talked about this a lot before. It's that at least in my like circle of friends and my daily life, I don't have a lot of support for these types of things. Like, I have a lot of support as a mother. I have a lot of support in, I guess, in a lot of other things that I do, but my creative life, I don't. And I also don't get to have a lot of really juicy, I don't know, the conversations that we have. I also don't have the opportunity to have a lot of that. So that for me was enough. Like, you need to have something that grounds you in the things that are important. And there's a lot of things in my life that are important that I have that support network for, except for this. Because I don't have a lot of people that are like, oh, here, I've been writing this, check this out. Or I've been painting this, check this out. Like, and those conversations inspire me to stay, to stay the course.
Right. Yes. Echoing so much of what I agree with completely. It's just like in our conversation, well, not just the conversation, it's like the relationship of having the collaboration, of having the commitment of bringing this forth. It's been like you say, I love what you said there. That's exactly my experience. It's like I do have support in lots of areas of my life, but because when you're on your own, it's so easy to doubt the value of the things that you love so much, right? I think we've talked about how we really do geek out on, frameworks and like self-discovery and things that will allow us to tap in. And I think we've done a shit ton of that on our own, right? And that's kind of like, we're yeah, I'm someone who will never be like, that's enough of that, Angela. I think we've done this is just a journal too far. No, I'm never going to say that. I'm always going to be like, oh, what is it? Let's hear. So there's that great kind of feeling, and I've noticed how that has given me such a confidence. I couldn't, I didn't know that was probably what I couldn't have articulated that was what I was seeking at the beginning of the year. But there is this sense of like, when you really love, when you give your attention so much to things, like all these books we read, we've got the book list, right? We've located the books that sort of punctuate this creative journey. We've referenced the Creative Act many times, the Creative Cure, the classic The Artist's Way. What else was in there? We've had Elizabeth Gilbert, and it's all to do with like a kind of philosophy that, what is life without the adventure of your becomingness? And how are you going to find yourself if you don't enact a creative rite of passage? Like, I think you and I are both like, well, you can't. so it's kind of weird to know that so strongly, have that belief, and yet be isolated with it. I think that's what you're kind of saying. That strongly. I know that really strongly. We walk that path, and we will, whether we have that support or not. But it's so affirming. That's a kind of good word. It's like, it's so affirming to have it reflected and encouraged and nourished and developed, like, the way that you hold space and the meditations that you do and the natural, easy way that you do things. It's just wonderful to be around. And I know that really seeps in. And, it's just made me feel like that a lot more of the things that I know that I'd really like to be doing are perhaps closer and easier than I perhaps thought. And that's a really up feeling.
Yeah. Well, that idea of you're the culmination of the 5 people you're closest to, which,
Wow.
I mean, I agree to a certain extent, but I didn't have somebody, one of those 5 people, you know what I mean, that would inspire me or get me excited about sticking with my creative stuff. And that's why I'm so glad that we've been doing this, is because now I've done a lot of things in that, because I have that anchor. And so that, I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the archetypal journey. We talk about the precipice. We talk about the gateway. What's the word I'm looking for? Thresholds. We don't talk about the ally so much. The ally is a huge part of the archetypal journey, right? And I think it was kind of hoping that our conversation was going to galvanize energy within a kind of community of listeners that are out there being like, I also know that there's like a part of me missing. I mean, I talk about this, I'm talking nowadays in terms of a reclamation journey. Maybe it's a bit of like I'm susceptible to buzzwords. It's definitely true, but it's like the creative journey, the reclamation journey, this idea that there's missing parts of us. Like there's the way that we are raised and the culture and society. We've touched on this in many episodes. Like it's impossible not to feel that something is very amiss, right? Something is not right. And then, that helpless feeling sometimes, but then coming back to not giving up on what we know is available. And I think I've touched on this a few times. Like, I love the creative journey because it's available. It's got this immediacy. We don't need money for it. We don't need a lot of things for it. It's there for us. All we need really is our attention to put upon it, to really own how important it is. And I feel like we're circling around that we've received that affirmation of just how important it is. You're coming alive. We talk about aliveness a lot. You're coming alive knowing, yeah, I had that 3-day marathon recently where I was in the flow and I was writing. It's still there. It's still happening. And you were talking about like hosting those meditation groups. I could see you. I think that's the other thing about being seen, right? I can really see you doing that. And like, we cannot be the only people out there that feel very strongly like that they are not going to give up on their inner creative world. And I think so much of it, there's another big piece of this puzzle, right, that I've kind of connected with recently, which is so much is like, how do we source this enough safety within ourselves for the expression that we know is like latent within? And sometimes I feel like maybe that's asking too much of ourselves, because I know I sourced a great deal of safety to be connected with you, with your experience, with your different skill set. We talked a lot about how you're great at holding structure, and I was able to source safety from that. So, as much as this is a solo journey to some extent, I also feel like it's an important point about collaborations and teamwork and finding a tribe and finding those accountability partnerships, is like that it really is an opportunity to sort of source safety and to grow within these like shapes that we make when we come together, instead of like always pushing through with whatever we have available individually. Yeah.
What I would say though, and this is why I think you and I are an interesting collaboration, because we definitely see things from different places and have different needs that we need to seek out. And so for me, what I learned from you is trust. So I didn't think that I'd go back to the screenplay. Like, and it's so weird because I know that this is how it happens. I get the tap that is like, okay, sit down, right. And as soon as I sit down, it flows out. But it's been a long time since I got the tap in regards to the screenplay. But after working with you, I realized that you have a certain level of trust in the creative force, that it's always there. And even if the impetus to paint isn't right, right front and center for you, that it will be there, that it will come again. And I kind of lost trust. I lost faith that I was going to be reacquainted, reinvited to come back to that screenplay. And then all of a sudden last week, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the tap. That's the tap. It hasn't gone away. And so through our conversation, that faith in that whole journey has been renewed for me. So thank you.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I was thinking about this phrase. I talk about painting without painting. I was like, yeah, you're writing without writing always. And I can really see that, because you have this, I would say, is it fair to say that you have like a command more? I observe within you a command of your own energy. It's just like, if you want to do something, you focus on it and you do it. To me, that's like a very mysterious way of being. I love it. It looks great from the outside. I don't know if I'll ever know too much about it from the inside. And I think it's like, so when I have that level of command and I command and it's not there, it's like, well, it's gone, but it's not gone. And then it's just that kind of, yeah, that receptivity to it's ongoing. It's writing without writing in the same way. I think it's so interesting. And again, this is this thing of like having parts of ourselves reflected that we can't see, that you observe so strongly within me, the trust that I have in like my creative process. I remember when you reflected that when we had a whole episode on our creative process, and I was like, oh, like, right. I guess I do. Everything that I'm talking about speaks to this innate trust, that I think it was that expectation that one way or another, it's always there. And therefore, if it's always there, then it's going to show up and come through. And that is so contradictory to kind of like a hallmark, especially of like my early like worldview, that, you know, things don't go right, they don't go well. Worst case scenario is how things are. So it's kind of like surprising, but I also know that that is part of the creative journey for me, which of course is why I gravitate to it and need it. Hold on to it, because it is like, it's not, I don't know how I feel about the word hope, because as you said, trust is different to hope. Like hope is, I don't know. Can you what
Hope
is
is an expectation. I think there's a expectation is maybe has kind of negative connotations, but there's this I think like an anticipation of a future event. And I think that that's different than having trust or faith in the process. I think that they can work hand in hand for sure. But faith to me seems like it has a much deeper anchor in the divine, is how I would, and whether that divine is God or, you know, the creative impulse or whatever. Hope for me is more of a kind of an intellectual pursuit.
Yeah, because I've used that word, having expectations, and I know that that's like something associated with perfectionism, right? That gets in the way. We actually don't want to have expectations. And a lot of my process is about like, I don't have any intention to draw anything specific, that I leave I leave it wide open to kind of what's coming through. But at the same time, there is this expectancy that a lot of the creative journey is about giving it space and having like a readiness and a willingness. How does that come in? The willingness, the openness, the willingness with the trust. How do I feel like there's something here to put together, and I'm not quite.
Well, I think a willingness is just showing up from a space of allowing, of receptivity. It's and I think that that is a necessary piece, but I don't think that it is inherent in hope. But I think that it's a necessary piece of faith.
Okay, getting a funny sensation in my body. So if I share with you that I think what goes on for me is like ongoing echoes of a little whispering prayer within the creative process, which is a kind of show me something, show me something. And maybe the trust and the faith is that maybe the response to that quiet prayer doesn't come immediately, but it's coming. It's coming. It's always coming. And maybe it's not tomorrow, no, it's not the weeks, maybe it's not yet, but it's coming. So something has been put in motion with that. Because sometimes you make that leap to faith and devotion, and I want to follow because I feel like it applies, but I hadn't quite got there, you know? And then I'm like, oh, but if I'm not even kind of aware that there's an ask, and what's an ask, it's kind of like a prayer, then that makes sense to me. That's how we get into that kind of terrain.
Well, and that's sort of what willingness is, right? So hope for me is sort of like a positive expectation. And that doesn't have to be grounded in trust. It doesn't have to be even grounded in willingness. Like lots of people hope for things, but then they don't show up for that to happen, or they put in no effort. But when we talk about trusting the process or having faith in the process, there's a certain amount of receptivity. There's a certain amount of allowing that needs to happen that requires you
Mm.
to show up. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, it is. And how is it that we show up?
well, part of that is I think how we show up energetically. So allowing, like when I get the tap, if I sit down and I'm like, no, it needs to be this way, that's not showing up with faith in the process. It's like I just need to allow, I just need to be that vessel that allows the whatever it is to come through, that allows the creative impulse to just kind of work with me. Um,
Mm.
uh, so and it's putting your ass in the seat, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's work.
part of it. So
This,
it's an openness, but it's also, like you said, a willingness to devote the time to, I don't know, to have that kind of merging with the creative impulse, the creative force.
yeah, you're available. Yeah, when you
Yes,
get the tap, you're available. You're not like, just a minute. No. You're
because there's
like,
lots of times in my
oh,
life
okay.
where I'm getting downloads and I'm not available. I'm like, okay, but I'm busy and I need to get the laundry in and then I got to go do this and, pick up my son or whatever. And I'm not available and I miss out on having that inspiration come through me. And so that's a big part of it, is like saying, whoa, 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 hold on, here I am.
So when you got the tap, what were you doing? Were you like,
It took the tap a little bit. It was like, okay, it's time. And I'm like, okay, no, 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 it's time. And it got a little bit louder. And then I'm like, okay,
mm,
it's time. I need to. So I opened up my laptop and then I just sat and I just pretty much didn't eat or move for like 6 hours the first day. So
lush? And like, yeah, and then you suddenly, I love that feeling of like, oh, I just spent this past 6 hours doing exactly what I know I'm supposed to be doing. I'm definitely enjoying like the mundane, like I don't categorize things, but like we talk about like I enjoy more and more just like everyday stuff. It has to be said. Like it seems to be coming alive. I don't quite know what that's about, but this whole other category of experience, right? Which is like when you feel like, oh, there was nowhere else I was supposed to be, nothing else I was supposed to be doing but that. And I feel like that shifts reality as well. Like suddenly you're like in another, the rest of the day stretches before you, but it's a different rest of the day. Yeah.